It wasn't until my Labrador, Max, started vomiting thick black sludge that I knew something was seriously wrong with the rainwater system I'd spent years building. At first, I chalked it up to clogged filters or maybe an algae bloom after the brutal heat wave that rolled through last week. But when I opened the inspection cap on my primary storage barrel, the smell hit me like a punch in the chest. Burnt motor oil, acrid and unmistakable. Thick, greasy liquid coated the inside of the barrel like someone had poured motor oil into a kiddie pool and left it to marinate. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My rainwater system, something I built myself from the ground up, was now tainted with toxic sludge. As I tried to wrap my head around the contamination, I did what I always do when something goes sideways. I checked the cameras. That's when I saw her. Middle of the day. Bright sun overhead. Strolling into my yard like she owned the place. That smug march and that pastel-colored blouse were unmistakable. Lydia Harper, president of our lovely neighborhood HOA. She was lugging 2 5-gallon jugs, arms strained like she was on some twisted CrossFit challenge. She walked right up to my main collection tank, popped the lid like she'd done it 100 times, looked around, and began pouring the contents into my water supply. When she finished, she capped the barrel, glanced up at my camera, gave it the finger, and walked off with a smirk that could curdle milk. That was the moment I knew Lydia wasn't just the neighborhood busybody with too much time and a rulebook. She was a criminal. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. My name is Noah Jameson, and I live in a modest but self-sufficient home on the edge of Brookstone Hollow, a neighborhood that boasts natural tranquility and orderly charm on its welcome sign. In reality, it's a suburban jungle ruled by Lydia and her HOA henchmen, an elite squad of clipboard-wielding enforcers who fined people for unauthorized succulents and threaten to tow kids' scooters for violating sidewalk decorum. I built my water collection system over the span of 2 years. Solar-powered UV filtration underground tanks, copper piping to route runoff into my native plant garden. It was my passion project. It sustained my vegetables, hydrated my dogs, and provided a safety net during droughts. Ironically, even some of my neighbors, including Lydia's pal Pam, had stopped by to borrow a few gallons during last year's heat wave. Everyone knew it worked. Everyone except Lydia. She'd always hated the look of my setup, called it unsightly and inconsistent with the community's aesthetic cohesion. But I never thought she'd do something like this. This wasn't passive-aggressive flyers or nasty notes taped to my door. This was deliberate. It was sabotage. It was poisoning. But what Lydia didn't know, and this is where her smug smirk was going to cost Harris, that I'm not just a guy with a DIY project. I'm a licensed environmental systems engineer. I spent a decade working for state disaster recovery agencies and another 5 consulting with the EPA on water safety initiatives. I've designed and audited water systems more complex than some municipalities. And more importantly, I document everything. After draining the tainted top layer from my tank using a siphon pump, I collected samples into sterile, lab-grade containers, sealed them, labeled them, and placed them in my cold box. I plan to test for hydrocarbon presence, metallic residue, and synthetic additives, anything that could trace the oil back to its source. But before I went full forensic investigator, I needed to find out one thing: was I Lydia's only target? So I started asking around quietly. I approached it casually, like I was doing a neighborhood water study. Within days, I discovered a disturbing pattern. Marta from 2 streets over told me her koi pond had turned black overnight. Frank, a retired mechanic, said his pressure washer, which he fills from a collection barrel, had started spewing brown muck. A couple houses down, Leah said her garden irrigation smelled like gasoline. This wasn't a one-off. Lydia had declared war on independent water systems. I suspected she saw them as a threat to her control. If people could manage their own water, what else might they question? At the next HOA meeting, she stood in front of the community center smiling like butter wouldn't melt. She passed out flyers about acceptable color schemes for patio furniture and introduced a new clause about non-conforming exterior utility structures, while giving me the kind of look usually reserved for telemarketers and overdue library books. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I went home and upgraded my motion sensors, added 2 new cameras, and dug through my old file permits, blueprints, even logs from my first barrel tests. I documented every detail. I mapped the system volume. I traced the overflow piping. I took soil samples downstream and swabbed the black streaks near the HOA's maintenance shed, where I suspected she was staging some of her operations. Then I made a trip to Automax, the local automotive supply store, and struck gold. The clerk remembered Lydia. Said she'd come in 3 days prior, bought 2 5-gallon drums of synthetic oil, paid in cash, and didn't know a carburetor from a French press. I asked if they had cameras. They did. I asked if I could get a timestamp. He laughed. What are you, with the EPA or something? I smiled. Something like that. By the end of the week, I had a folder thick enough to give a Tree Nightmares photos, timestamps, witness statements, lab samples, and surveillance footage. It was a case no jury could ignore. But I wasn't just building a report. I was laying a legal landmine, and Lydia was about to step on it. I called my old supervisor from the EPA, a guy named Marcus Hall, and said, "Remember when you told me to call if I ever saw someone dump oil into a runoff zone?" He paused. Yeah. Please tell me this isn't hypothetical. It's not. And you're going to want to bring a camera. Marcus showed up 3 days later with a full field team disguised as utility contractors. While Lydia fluffed geraniums for the upcoming HOA beautification tour, they were crawling through storm drains, swabbing culverts, and testing water samples from the stream that ran south of the neighborhood, the one that flowed into a protected wetland area. The contamination levels were off the charts. This isn't just illegal, Marcus said, standing by my garden with a scanner in hand. This is felony level. Lydia had no idea. She was too busy prepping welcome kits for prospective buyers. That made it all the sweeter when the EPA team, armed with warrants, walked into the HOA office mid-morning and asked to see maintenance records, supply receipts, and storage sheds. I wasn't there to see it in person. But according to Frank, who happened to be walking his dog nearby, Lydia turned white as chalk. They walked in like they owned the place, he told me later. She started that fake polite thing she does, "Oh, you must be with Parks and Rec." And then the guy just goes, "EPA, ma'am. We have a few questions." Within 30 minutes, they found several 5-gallon drums behind the maintenance shed. One of them, marked Drain and Save LH, matched the chemical compound from my tank to the molecule. She denied everything, of course. Said it was a setup. Claimed someone planted it. But no one bought it. Not when the video showed her doing the deed. Not when the oil matched the same brand from her Automax receipt. Not when her name was literally on one of the containers. The EPA didn't arrest her that day. They didn't need to. They issued a formal investigation notice and began proceedings. Meanwhile, whispers spread faster than mold in a crawlspace. By the time the sun set, nearly every house in the neighborhood knew. But I wasn't done. Something still bothered me. Lydia wasn't the type to get her hands dirty unless she was absolutely sure no one would catch her. That meant this wasn't her first rodeo, so I followed her. Thursday afternoon, she left her house with what looked like more containers in the trunk. I stayed 3 cars behind. She drove across town to a rundown self-storage facility and disappeared into Unit 308. 20 minutes later, she reappeared, trunk empty. The next morning, I rented the unit directly across from hers and installed a motion-activated camera in the doorframe. 2 days later, I got footage of her moving more containers, labeling them, checking seals, flipping through what looked like inventory checklists. That's not vandalism. That's logistics. I handed the footage to Marcus. His eyes widened. If she's stockpiling and distributing, he said, this isn't just dumping. It could fall under hazardous material trafficking. He forwarded everything to federal investigators. The following week, Lydia's house was searched. Her garage was a chemical warehouse. Funnels, gloves, labels, boxes organized by oil type and source. She wasn't just dumping, she was managing a small-time black market for oil disposal. They served her with multiple charges: felony dumping, environmental endangerment, misappropriation of HOA funds, conspiracy. They found payments from HOA accounts to a shell company supposedly for landscaping. The company? Clearski Disposal. Already flagged for shady dealings in 3 other states. But the nail in her coffin came from someone I didn't expect: her ex-husband. He came forward after seeing her story on the news. Claimed she dumped oil in his garden during their divorce. Had photos, emails, notes in her handwriting. It was over. At her trial, Lydia didn't say a word. Her lawyer tried to paint it as a smear campaign by eco-extremists. But the footage, the data, the receipts, they told the real story. Guilty. All counts. She was sentenced to 18 months of probation, barred from participating in any HOA, and ordered to pay full restitution plus community service cleaning roadside trash. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. Her downfall wasn't just about one rain tank. It was a reckoning for years of pettiness, control, and abuse of power. The day after her sentencing, I installed a wooden sign next to my rebuilt system. It read, "This system survived sabotage and stood as a testament to truth, resilience, and clean water. May ignorance never poison progress again." Thanks for the inspiration, LH. It became a neighborhood landmark, a symbol, and every time it rains and I hear that water trickling into my tanks clean, safe, and untainted, I remember what it means. Not just water. Justice.